Good morning, everyone. We'll just let a couple of minutes just to let everybody come in before we get started. Please, if you want, introduce yourself on the chat, just say hello. And as I say, we'll get started in a couple of minutes. I think we'll get started. Still got a few people waiting to come in, but I think we'll just get going. We've got a lot to cover today. So first of all, welcome everyone. Thank you all for coming. Obviously the title's there on the screen. We're talking about business resilience. Just to go over a couple of housekeeping, we are recording this webinar and it will be shared after the session. Can I ask anyone, obviously, if they want to put any chat in, please put it into the chat facility. And if anyone's got any questions for the session, we will take them, we will answer them at the end, but if they can use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So I think without further ado, we'll get started and I'll pass over to Becky to kick us off today.
Thanks, Craig. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on business resilience. Clearly, it continues to be a very challenging time for all of us. So today we will be discussing the importance of resilience, what we have learned from recent events, and how we can future-proof our business to overcome future difficulties, whatever they may be. So on the slide, you'll see the running order for today. Very simple. We plan to have half an hour of discussion between Graham and I, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. But please use the chat box and the Q&A box to enter your questions as you go. So just to give you a flavour of us to start off with, because you might be wondering why are accountants talking to us about business resilience. Graham and I are both partners at MHA, Larking, Gowen, Chartered Accountants. We're one of the largest independent firms of accountants in East Anglia. We've got 7 offices across Norfolk, Suffolk and Essex, with approximately 350 people in our teams, and that includes 24 partners. We act for a vast range of clients, mainly in East Anglia, but also across the UK via our membership of the MHA Association, which is like-minded firms that have joined together nationwide. And we can also provide support worldwide, as MHA is part of Baker Tilly International, and that has connections in 143 countries. So you can see that we can pretty much cover everything, but we're still an independent firm offering the personal service that we know our clients really value, and that's where we want to be. My role is to lead the business and private team in Suffolk, assisting owner-managed businesses, possibly like yourselves, with all aspects of tax and accounting, including personal taxes. My focus is on helping those business owners grow their business and achieve their goals. I'll just hand over to Graham to introduce himself.
Morning, everyone. Thanks very much for joining. My name is Graham Mummery. I'm an audit and advisory partner in the corporate team for MHA Larking Gowen, normally based out of the Ipswich office when we're not working from home. And when I am working from home, I'm based in Felixstowe, next to the sea. I've got 20 years experience of working across East Anglia, working with owner-managed businesses and various stakeholders, helping them to achieve their corporate ambitions.
Thanks, Graham. So just a reminder of what Craig said, you'll be on mute for the duration of the webinar. There is a Q&A session at the end, so please input any questions in the question box as we go. We're going to run a couple of polls throughout the webinar. We'll explain how they work as we go. If you haven't used them before, they're very simple, and a recording will be available afterwards. Okay, so today we're talking about business resilience. Now, when we started writing this content a few weeks ago, we were optimistic that by now we would be saying things like post-pandemic. As it stands, we're clearly very much mid-pandemic, and the uncertainty is perhaps increasing rather than decreasing for us all. We are business owners just like you, and we really do understand the challenges you face. And of course, we're always speaking to our clients about those same challenges. What is clear is that we are in a recession, predicted to possibly be the worst we have seen. And in these challenging times, it is even more important to make sure our business is resilient to weather the storm, whatever that storm may be. We need to future-proof our business, looking at it from every angle to make sure we have considered everything. And this means we have to step back, take time out of the business and assess to give ourselves the best chance to weather the storm. We know that's difficult, but it's not just this storm, it's future challenges too. So just bear that in mind. We're not just talking about the current situation, it is looking forwards. But indeed, we can look at the past to help us learn from the future, can't we, Graham?
Yeah, so while Becky and I were researching this subject, I came across this report from McKinsey from May 19, so pre-pandemic, which sums up why business resilience is so important. The emphasis of the report focused on the fallout from the 2007-8 economic crisis. And as you can see on screen, recessions are tough to predict, although possibly not the one we're currently facing, because following a pandemic, you're bound to have a recession. You can see in their words, though, recessions are as sure as sunrise. So the report found that businesses who they considered to be resilient moved early to put precautions in place ahead of any downturn. They entered the downturn ahead, they dipped less, and they came out in better shape than their competitors, ready to invest for growth and, in their words again, with guns blazing.
So it's really important to think about, first of all, how resilient we feel now. And we can then decide where we need to invest time, money and energy to best position ourselves to ride out those waves of uncertainty. So at this point, we're going to run a quick poll. Many of you will have seen these before. All you need to do is click on the answer that best applies to you on your screen, so either touch screen or using your mouse. It is entirely anonymous. Nobody, including us, will know how you have responded. And this is just intended to give us a feel for where you feel you are now. So the question for you is, it should be coming up on your screen, how resilient do you feel now? And you've got 4 options there if you want to take part. Amazing, I could take on the world. Bit wobbly, but I think it's okay. I'm fearing the worst, or I just want to hide under the duvet and hope it will all go away. If you could just select which of those you think best applies to you, and then we'll get the results up as soon as we can. Give you a couple of seconds. Hopefully you're able to access those.
Yeah, we're just waiting on just a couple more to answer, Becky, and then we should be able to share the results.
Thanks, Craig. I think it changes daily as well. So this really is just to get a feel for where you
How
might
are you feeling
be today.
today?
That's the challenging bit, isn't it? Okay. So you can see the results there, Graham.
Yeah, so no one feeling amazing, but equally no one stuck at home hiding under the duvet, hoping that this all just goes away. I think, as you can see, we're probably much the same as a lot of you guys when we think about running our business, that we hope we're doing the right things in terms of business resilience, but actually only time will tell how that plays out. And for those of you that are fearing the worst, hopefully on the outcome of today's session, we can give you some hints and tips and some ways in which you can put some measures in place to build that business resilience.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. So I think it's important to first of all focus on what went well, certainly in the recent crisis that we're obviously still right in the middle of it, but there are some key learning points already, aren't there? And our experience, both in our business and from speaking to our clients, is that those who feel resilient now probably are able to focus on these positives. So first of all, the technology's played a huge part. Those who had invested in tech prior to the crisis probably found that it paid off. They were able to move to working from home easier, or whatever they needed to do when we needed to be agile and really react, didn't we? And bigger businesses may have been better placed to do that. We absolutely appreciate that. I think whatever size your business, investment in technology has moved up the list of priorities, whether it's software or whether it's more kit that your teams need to be able to work wherever they are. We've certainly seen that aspect of it. We found that our teams embraced the technology when we had to. The technology had been in place before, they just hadn't been using it. So the Skype, Teams functions, things like that. And I think that will change as we go forward. Those people have now embraced it and they're on board. It might mean that we need to invest in training so that we are using that tech efficiently going forward and you're getting the best from it and people feel supported. Simply because we have the capability, it doesn't mean that we're using it properly. And it's often the case, isn't it, with software? Another positive is that we learned that flexible working works. Many of us moved to working from home. I appreciate it doesn't apply to all businesses at all. but we do recognise that going forwards, flexibility in how we work will need to continue. And I think that's important to remember in terms of if we want to attract and retain the best talent in our businesses, particularly the younger generations. Younger people tend to see work as something that happens in their lives, not a destination that they go to. And if they can work remotely, they will want the option to do that. They will ask why not. And I think others in your teams will as well. That's not just limited to the younger generations. People have seen different ways of doing things. And of course, some people are more efficient working from home, and you will be the judge of that as the owner or the leader in your business. So why wouldn't we embrace that where we could? Another positive that we saw, certainly, and our clients said, was that decision-making had to become much faster. We had to be agile and just able to move quickly, where particularly in bigger businesses, we might have taken ages to reach decisions, lots of meetings, committees, etc. We had to get on with it. I think that's a really good lesson we need to take forward. We wasted a lot of time talking, and we need to actually do more doing. And I think there can be a tendency to slip back to old habits. We're starting to see it now. We really need to resist doing that and to really take that forward as a positive. And then the underlying theme of all of this is communication, of course. We learned that we had to manage that really well. And I think both socially and in business, communication, we've seen that it has improved. People have gone back to really communicating with each other properly. We've had to learn different ways if we're not all together physically. We've had to make that little bit more effort sometimes. We've also learned that there's efficiencies to be had. We don't necessarily need to spend time travelling to meetings when we can have a video call, although, of course, we wouldn't want to completely replace those face-to-face personal meetings either. But those different ways of working have also brought challenges, which Graham will now speak about.
Becky. So, yeah, for those of you who felt less resilient, you probably faced some of the following challenges. And as Becky mentioned, the tech has played a big part, and the Zoom calls, Teams, is all very well and good. But actually, for that long-term strategic thinking, the strategic planning, getting everyone together and having that open sharing of ideas, that's much harder to do in a digital environment. Equally, the communication, as Becky said, where you're disseminating messages and using your social channels and things like this webinar to get message out, that's been great. But actually, those informal personal catch-ups have been harder to find the time to find the right forum for having that done, those so-called water cooler moments. Ideas generation and the learning. So experience we've had in the past, and what we often refer to as that learning by osmosis, that just isn't really happening digitally. While we're not together, you're not overhearing things that you're not actively involved in. Another thing is the need of businesses to collaborate and innovate to thrive. Getting in that mindset of creativity and ideas generation again. It's much more of a challenge when you're stuck behind a screen. It's not so easy to bounce ideas around. I don't think the digital world has quite come up with a solution for that yet. And lastly, we've seen that some businesses are starting to return to offices. Indeed, like Becky and I are facing increasing pressure from our clients to get back out and see them. This creates more uncertainty though, because the mechanics of the meeting and the sentiment is definitely not across the board. We've seen a number of larger businesses actually, I know, for example, FSB, we've seen the banks and lawyers, the big four, all tell teams they'll be working at home until 2021. So this is far from being over, and we need to remain as flexible as ever. Faced with all this uncertainty though, we thought we'd gauge the temperature of the audience with another poll. So we've heard a lot of noise in the press about the office being dead. So in your opinion, is the office dead? And the options there, yes, no. For those of you who don't have an office, what's an office? And finally, for those who want some flexibility. Just give you a few more moments to let results come in. There we go, quite a split.
Yeah. And the last option was my suggestion, because that's where I firmly sit. You kind of want the best of both worlds. You certainly want the office to be there, but I like the flexibility. There is a split there, isn't there? 38% compared to 35, saying is the office no. But generally, the office, I think, will continue. It's certainly the feeling that we're getting. I guess the difficulty will be in making decisions about property as to how much space people will need. Because if people want complete flexibility, they want to be able to, decide which days they work. They don't want to work to a set rota, for example, and therefore you need to manage capacity. And certainly at the moment, we're working on reduced capacity anyway, as we all have to. So I think, definitely. I think all the commentary on is the office dead can be misleading, but it's certainly an interesting point to consider. And so, as ever, all these things we need to think about when we think about where do we want to get to. I think we need to get to a point where we are resilient, our people are happy, and the office may be a big part of that. And of course, you need to consult with them on that issue. We appreciate that the office scenario doesn't apply to all businesses. What is important to think about is what would make you as resilient as possible. And if you're not where you want to be in terms of business resilience, now is the time to act.
We've set this. Oh, sorry, Becky.
It's all right. So the question you might be asking is why. I guess we all understand what resilience is, but why now? I think ultimately we need to be able to sleep at night. You need to ask yourself, can the business survive another challenge, whatever it may be? It might be a disaster such as a fire or something awful that did damage your premises, halt production, whatever it may be. Of course, there's the pandemic, which is ongoing, changes the political spectrum. Any challenge that comes along, we need to make sure that we are resilient as possible so we can meet those. We need to allow ourselves time to think, and that is, I think, the biggest challenge at this stage. How do you prioritise that? And your teams to engage with them on this issue. This stuff certainly isn't easy. If it was, we'd all be super resilient without even trying. And it's really allowing ourselves time outside the business to do that, distinguishing what is urgent, so people are putting pressure on you to meet deadlines, etc., compared to the important about looking up, looking out, and how you take your business forward. Someone explained to me a way of thinking about it is rocks, gravel, sand, which you may have heard of. So if you deal with the detail first, that's the sand, and that will fill up your time, fill up your bucket, and there's no room for the gravel, and then there's certainly no room for the rocks. If you did the big stuff first, the rocks, the gravel and the sand will naturally fit in around it, whether it's through, delegating, calling on other people, building a team around you. And if you try and think of it like that, what are the real rocks that you need to deal with first? I think that will help you in moving forwards and being a resilient business. Now, to make it easier, we've identified some key areas, which Graham is very keen to explain.
Sorry, jumped a little early there. So Becky and I have come up with what we've termed our pillars of resilience. We'll go into a little more detail on each pillar in the following slides. Broadly though, what we're aiming for here is to give you some ideas of the skills or processes that we feel you need to have in place as business owners to build a resilient business. So our first pillar is having a plan. What does an uncertain future look like, and what different scenarios can you see playing out? How flexible can you be as a business to pivot into other revenue streams, for example, and what investments do you need to make to enable this to happen? So as I was running through this at the weekend, I saw this picture, and while it only loosely fits in here, I was sort of determined to squeeze it in. Becky mentioned before the use of tech. I guess what I'm trying to illustrate is that we've seen businesses can achieve a huge amount of change in times of adversity. And how much better would it be if we could execute that same amount of change, but while we're in control? Historically, we've seen businesses be rather conservative in their planning. The McKinsey report that we referenced earlier saw that those that had a bold plan in place fared better than their competitors when coming out of a downturn. So what do we really mean by a plan? All we're talking about is something you can use to communicate your thoughts to various stakeholders. You might not have had a plan before, but we've seen many. Some of the worst are overly complex, and indeed some of the best fit on half a side of A4. So what does your plan need? Well, it needs to encompass your long-term vision for the company, but it also needs to be flexible enough for the medium and short term. You need to contain some thoughts about different income streams, as I mentioned, and what impact a downturn might have on each of these. The basis of any good plan, though, is demonstrating the ability to manage cash flow. As we all know, cash is king. Identifying controllable costs, limit those where you can, review terms and renegotiate with suppliers, all things that businesses have been through over the last 6 months or so. Creating a safety buffer as well, so reducing debt and entering periods of uncertainty with more financial flexibility, trying to negotiate early with your banks and your funders, trying to make sure that you have that sufficient headroom. And finally, next on the list, cut costs ahead of the curve, preparing earlier, moving faster, and reviewing those operating costs to become as lean as possible going into a downturn. Finally, reviewing your supply chain, looking at how flexible your supply chain is, where can you drive some competitive tension to get the best deals. So having a plan flexible is most beneficial. You might have also had to forecast monthly, for example, for funders. During the recent pandemic, though, we saw lots of people flexing this to make their long and medium term plans much more short term, looking at cash on a weekly or daily basis. Thinking about how you can make your forecasting systems as flexible as possible so they can anticipate issues before they arise. It also needs to work for you, though, and it needs to work for your business. As I said before, plans can be overly complex. This doesn't make them any better. You and your teams need to be able to use and understand them. Also, using the tools that you have available. So, for example, using cloud accounting, asking your advisor for some assistance. Make sure you have the right people around you to deliver on this plan, both internally and externally, which I'll touch on later. During the COVID period, you could look back at who stood up and who stood out, who showed what they're made of, and who in your team struggled. Empower your team to deliver on these plans and have the confidence that they can do so. Your leadership team must be agile and resilient in themselves to be able to make decisions quickly in an atmosphere of uncertainty and stress.
Okay, so the second pillar is communication, and I've already mentioned that this has been, something that's really come to the forefront throughout the pandemic. We've all said how important it is, and that's with all our stakeholders. And by stakeholders, we mean anyone with an interest in our business: customers, suppliers, your bank, HMRC, your accountant, your shareholders, and of course your staff. Now, we need to maintain all those good habits that we formed where we have better communication because we had to. Let's do it when we don't necessarily have to, and really build those relationships in the good times as well as the not so good. It's obviously important to think about who you're communicating with and to choose your messaging method appropriately, and think about how will your statement have the most impact. For example, we saw large businesses using social media to get statements out to keep their customers aware of when they would be able to open their premises again, for example, or what was happening with deliveries where it was online. And that was big business. You wouldn't communicate with your teams in the same way. So you do need to choose your method to suit your audience clearly. And like all communication, it certainly needs to be timely and effective. I think little and often is probably best, certainly when you're dealing with your teams, or you're a smaller business and you have those relationships with customers and suppliers. Certainly not a big statement and then nothing for weeks, because if you keep people informed, they're on side, aren't they? You know how you feel personally when you're not engaged with any business that you're dealing with. If you forget to speak to them, they may just lose you forever. And I think that's why communication is a key pillar of resilience, and that's why it's so important to get it right.
The previous two slides don't count for anything if you don't actually believe you can execute them. So some self-belief is crucial. It's easy for us to sit here and say have self-belief, but it's much harder to develop in practice. There's a lot of literature on this subject, but a few highlights I have seen work are keeping a list of your past successes and accomplishments, seeking and acting on feedback, taking small steps and setting small challenges. This is a good anecdote that the SAS about making your bed first thing in the morning. That way, whatever else happens in the day, you've achieved something and you have a freshly made bed to get into at night. And knowing that self-belief is a habit, and it takes 30 days to develop a new habit. So not expecting this change to happen overnight. On the flip side of that, there's a fine line between arrogance and self-belief. We think the latter means knowing and playing to your strengths. More importantly, knowing your weaknesses knowing those areas where you aren't as strong and enabling you to build a team around you to assist in those areas. When we think of a team, I suspect everyone defaults to those within the organisation. But don't forget your team could be also encompass the external team you build around you, including, for example, coaches, mentors, lawyers, your bankers, your accountants, and many other people in the business community. So some belief that you can do this will help you put all the business planning and all the communication strategy you have in place. It will also help you to engage the people you employ, if anyone, and to share the vision that will get the business through some unpredictable times.
And the final pillar is purpose. You need to understand why you are doing what you do and what the purpose is for your business. Why do you turn up for work every day? Why do your team turn up every day? If you understand that, it really does underpin everything that you do. It will become the culture of your business. I'm sure many of you have spent a lot of time building that culture, whether you're a sole trader working alone or a large business employing lots of people. It is fundamentally why you do what you do. Culture is really hard to achieve, and to maintain that remotely is a real challenge. And I think that's one of the things we are going to face going forwards when we talk about is the office dead and how we work going forwards. It's that beat of the drum, isn't it? How we do things around here, so that if you asked anyone in your business, how do we do it? They would know what the purpose is of the business. We all recognise that money is not the main motivator for most people anymore. We need to tap into a belief that people have, that they will go the extra mile for you in good times and in bad. Because even when a business is floundering, those people will then step up for you, and you will also be able to step up for yourself and for the business. If you can do that, you will unlock the discretionary effort in your team, and that's really where we want to be. I think we all need to step back and acknowledge that we have all faced challenges, and the ways we have adapted have varied hugely. But we all did it in some way, and that was because you had a purpose for your business and you didn't give up.
So there are pillars of resilience. I think if you're filling each of these pillars, you'll have a resilient business. I'd encourage you to go away from here and consider each of these pillars and how you currently perform against each. Give yourself a mark out of 10, and then think about what you need to do to improve that score. Here's our call to action. Have a plan. Develop that plan with those around you and communicate it to them in an appropriate manner. Have or develop some self-belief. Think about the small challenges that you face every day and how you overcome them. Think about what the purpose of your business is. How do you unlock that discretionary effort in your teams? And why do people get up every morning to come to work with you? Why do you get up every morning? Engaging with people on that purpose level can make your business stronger and make sure that your people want to continue working with you. If you do all of those things, you'll have a resilient business. So slightly ahead of schedule, there's our presentation done. I'm sure you've all been active on the chat. So if you had any questions, Craig, I'm not sure if any have come in, but now's the time for Q&A.
So yeah, I think that's been really interesting, really helpful. Just obviously, just giving people a bit of insight on, what they should be thinking of, like, and it was, I think the poll results were really keen and really interesting for people, that obviously it was good to see that people are not just like hiding under the duvet and just hoping it's going to go away. I think that obviously that was the kind of fear at the start, but we've kind of got through that. So I think, do you want to maybe talk about a bit more? You said, do you think the office is dead? Like, what does that mean, obviously, for your organisation? Because obviously you're currently both at home at the moment, but as Becky, I think you said at the start, you're one of the biggest, like, kind of in your area, office-wise. So what does that mean for you currently?
We are basically working on reduced capacity, as all business owners are. You have to make sure your premises are COVID compliant and have that certification in place, which means we're probably at about 50% capacity, depending on the style of our office. Where Graham and I work in Ipswich, it's fairly open plan, so we have a bit more flexibility. What it means is that we have to be quite strict with the rota system on how many people can be in at any one time. You can't all just turn up for work, or on other days no one turn up. And when they're not in the office, they are working from home. So I think we've got the structure in place at the moment. I was very keen that everyone didn't automatically spend too much time back in the office, because if we do have to return to working from home full time, the whole mindset of that we didn't want to go through that challenge again to the extent that we did before, because for some people it has been a real challenge. I think, you know, I am keen that we spend time, and I have been in 1 or 2 days a week is probably the average for many of us. When you're back with the team, you realise those aspects that you've really missed, whether it's the banter or just the understanding what's going on in their lives. As Graham said, it's much harder to catch up on a personal level and understand where people are in their lives if you're only engaging with them in a meeting where there is a purpose for that meeting. So I think we've also had people join throughout the pandemic. So it's really important for them to spend time with the team and to build those connections and to understand the culture, as I said. And I think for any business that's had changes in leadership, perhaps during this, you know, there have been changes, that will be really challenging as well. We need to recognise some people want to get back and others don't. And it's that flexibility as well that's really key at the moment. And I think Graham would agree, in his team, we work in the same building, different floors. But yeah, I think the same really applies across the board, don't you think?
Yeah, I think we're sort of facing this real dichotomy as business owners and then team leaders. I think as business owners, see an opportunity here to reduce some footprint and increase some profitability, because we don't necessarily need all the space, and we've proven that we don't need all the space that we currently have. Having said that, we've got the well-being of our people to think about, and actually the space we need at the moment when people want to come back to work is almost double, because we need to keep that extra space between people and keep people socially distanced. So yeah, there's no easy answer to the is the office dead. Things I have liked though, so we caught up face to face with a fellow partner in Ipswich a few weeks ago. We stood at 3 sides of a room and bounced some ideas around, and actually I came out of that sort of informal session feeling really invigorated. I've got kind of the creative juices flying. And Becky, I know you've done some things with your team where you've met outside, had pizzas delivered, so still trying to get that social aspect before we went into the 6 people in one place rule, but trying to develop as much of the social aspect and keeping the normality there for as much as possible.
I did see something on social media though, that if someone said, if anyone suggests a Zoom quiz, I might do something desperate, because I think we did all get a bit fed up with that.
Yeah, I think it's right, and there's an interesting comment just came in the Q&A that basically that people, they don't think we will understand how the new normal will work in terms of offices until office accommodation is back to normal and everybody feels safe and everybody can be in the office together. Many people are obviously avoiding going back to their office because they don't feel safe and because different office setups are having to be COVID secure. And I think that is right. I think offices are certainly, for like, we've been back to the office part-time, and it just feels a very different environment at the moment because you've got all the safety measures in place. And I think people want flexibility because of, I think, the lack of safety, and maybe not due to because they feel it's what they need in their life. And I don't know, I think they're right. Until we get back to a kind of normality where people can be in the office, it's that kind of reality is not going to take shape at the moment, I think.
We touched on it as well, the different, the confusion sometimes this causes between whether you're meeting face-to-face, whether you're having people on Skype, and whether all of you are meeting face-to-face or some of you are face-to-face and some on Skype. So I think the tech for that still needs to catch up a little bit. I think the teleconferencing tech isn't probably quite up to speed as just the webcam tech is, for example.
And I think it's important to engage with everyone in your team, isn't it? On what their personal preference is at this time. That's certainly what we've done. And it varies across our offices. So our Norwich office, for example, is city centre, and a lot of people rely on public transport to get to work, and they just, that's an extra risk that they don't want to do. Whereas where we're based in Ipswich, there is no public transport particularly. So we drive, we have car parking, and that works better in this scenario. It gives people more security that they can make themselves safe. So every scenario is different and every individual is different. Some people are desperate to get back because they just want to get away from either working alone or family, not having a quiet space. So yeah, I think it's understanding, it's talking to your people, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that is right. That we've noticed that, like, when we first went into lockdown, we were working all at home, doing regular Zoom catch-up calls and everything. And now we're back. Now that people are back in the office, it's a bit mix of both. It is very difficult if you've got 3 people sitting not like next to each other, but in the same office, and you're trying to do a Zoom call. You can hear people's microphones, you can hear people in each other's ears, and it's very difficult when you've got to. And Graham's right. I think the technology needs to be there for you kind of more streamlined conference facilities, so that there is a mix of, I think, what they're called hybrid kind of events and hybrid communications now, so that you can have a mix of. We've all been doing it, but I think it's now just happening on a larger scale.
Yeah, definitely. I had that yesterday where microphones annoy each other, don't they? If 2 people have got them on and they're in one place because they're in the office socially distanced. So yeah, we'd all adjusted to one way of doing it, and we'd taken huge steps in getting to that point. You know, I said people who'd never embraced using Skype. We've had it for months, if not years. We just didn't use it as a firm. Now everyone is proficient on Skype, Teams, Zoom, and it's the next stage, isn't it? It's where we go next with it to really make it work.
Yeah.
In whatever the new norm looks like.
And I think another thing to obviously chat about is, so obviously that's great in theory, the pillars and everything, but you know, you're a business owner, you don't have time to, or you don't feel like you've got time to implement anything. Is there anything that you've dealt with in the past with clients, or anything that you could give like business owners advice on how to find the time to maybe put this into practice?
Shall I take that one to start with?
Yeah.
I think, and I found this personally, that you need to diarise it.
Yeah.
Basically, you need to make it as important as a client meeting, or, you know, an appraisal with a member of staff or something you wouldn't cancel, because otherwise you don't do it. And if you don't focus on your business, you really have just got an expensive job. You know, you got into your business, you started your business for very good reasons, and you need to look up and out. You can't afford not to do it, because if you're not building it and looking forward, then there's really no point. So I think if you're working alone, find someone who will challenge you, who you can seek counsel from. That's really important. So it might be a coach, or it might be a mentor, and I appreciate there might be a cost to that. It might just be someone you like and value, whose experience you really value and you want to tap into. And really take time to learn and understand, take on different views, either, you know, both to reinforce your own, but also to challenge your own. And I found LinkedIn is really useful for that. You know, people are really becoming thought leaders and presenting their ideas, and far more now, because we've had to revert to those other means. But definitely diarise it would be my key. It's the same as with exercise. If you diarise it, it happens. And if you don't, you will always find another reason, and give it priority. You have to, you know, make it as important as all the other things that you do.
We spoke, didn't we, Becky, about those things in our diaries that we just don't move, and this just has to be one of those things. I'm a big fan of the Eisenhower matrix, which is balancing what's urgent versus what's important. I think it's all too easy to focus on those things that are urgent, and that's often at the detriment of those things that are important, which would be the working on your business.
Yeah. And if you've got an appointment with someone else, it's a bit like exercising with someone else. It kind of makes you do it, doesn't it? You're not just letting yourself down, because you can make excuses for yourself. But actually saying to someone else, "Oh, I need to move that meeting again," is a different thing. And I think you're less inclined to do it. So if you can engage with someone else, it will both help and support you, but also make sure it happens.
Yeah. So we have got a question here, another question here. So how are you going to replicate that learning by osmosis with an atomized workforce?
With difficulty, I think. We're working on it, and we are aiming to do that by example. So we're trying to involve people in the things that we do day to day, and not just do them in isolation. But Becky, unless you've got any other thoughts, I think that is something we're still struggling with as a firm. Is we are, by our very nature, a learning organisation. We need people to learn and progress each year. We have a model that is sort of predicated on that basis, and we're finding some stagnation where people aren't actually learning and developing those new skills, and they don't know what those new skills should be. So without putting something formal in place, which by its nature then would make it sort of the not by osmosis, we're struggling to get that time with people.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we had our new trainee intake start the 1st of September, and they're new to the business, they're new to the profession, and that's a real challenge. And we made a decision that they needed to be priority to be in the office with other team members within all the restrictions, of course. But can you imagine starting a job at age 18 or 21 straight out of A-levels or uni and no experience of that style of work possibly, and having to sit at home and work out how to log on? That really wasn't ideal in our mind, and I think it's really important that both they and others throughout their careers do have that interaction with the team, and they're just listening and things like that. I mean, we trialed different things whilst it was, we were in lockdown and we weren't able to be in the office at all, so we had perhaps Zoom running with several people in the meeting and trying to recreate a virtual office when we were conscious that the trainees perhaps weren't asking as many questions as they should, because they often hear others asking questions and then feel reassured that they can ask questions. But when it comes to meetings, as we've said, it's very easy to have a purpose and you deal with it and then you're gone again. And I think, absolutely, taking that time to be together in some form has to be a priority.
Yeah, and I think it's just a comment that's came through is, so working remotely, we found that just like I've done the same, just having Zoom open in the background with other people there, just so that, because you do miss that kind of bouncing ideas of something comes into your head, and when you're working at home you have to send an email or you have to send a WhatsApp or any kind of message, whereas just having that person sitting beside you or in the same office just to bounce things off is kind of been lost in lockdown. And I think it's ways of addressing that for a new kind of way of working at the moment.
Yeah, and we work across several offices, so actually I think some people I've seen more of in the last 6 months than I would have done normally. But and it doesn't feel like I haven't seen them for 6 months, but I haven't physically, because we've built those. So there's been pros and cons, as I say. We've built those relationships over time, but absolutely I find it much easier to have someone there. And once you get over the awkwardness of perhaps you're in silence a little bit at the time, if you're working away, it's kind of become what we do now, hasn't it? A screen it doesn't feel quite as obstructive as it used to.
No, I think, and we've said, like, from our point of view, the FSB point of view, we found that like we have a large majority of home working staff anyway that work in the field that are there. And I think, I must admit, I've seen a lot more of them in the last 6 months than I probably would do sitting in the office, because it's normally you pick up a phone or send them an email, whereas doing video conferencing, doing Zoom calls has actually, added to the kind of face-to-face and collaboration. I think it's made people be a bit more strategic, I think.
Yeah, and I think it varies hugely, doesn't it? But I think we've got over our insecurities of seeing ourselves on camera because we had to, and so this has become what we do. I think the next steps are to make sure we take the time and not have to have a purpose for a planning session or just a brainstorming session, as Graham said. Otherwise, the strategic big thinking gets lost. So it is allowing ourselves that time, exactly as we said, to and if you diarise it, hopefully it would happen, but allowing that time to do that. Yeah,
and I think you touched on, Becky, about obviously you going out finding professional coaches, people like that. What else, like for small businesses, who else could they have as a key potentially external team member? Because obviously we've all got our internal teams, but for small businesses they don't have the luxury of having everyone like that inside their business.
No, absolutely. And I think that's when organisations such as yourselves, FSB, really useful. Your local chamber, for example, Institute of Directors, if you happen to be a member of that, tap into these things. Some of them have a cost, some of them don't. We have several organisations locally that support small businesses and offer that engagement, that support. And a lot of it is free of charge, particularly at the entry level, if you're a startup business. So I think seek those sources out. Certainly your advisors, your accountants and bankers and solicitors may well know of those people if you don't. Use LinkedIn, use Twitter, really engage. I think, we found that people, like I say, because we can't network in the traditional way, people are really putting comment out there, creating this, what they call thought leadership, creating a following, and just sort of tapping into those. Some of them, it'll say on LinkedIn how long it's going to take you. If you notice, like 2-minute read or something, it's really worth just dipping into those things. And then you'll find people that you feel, you know, naturally drawn towards, and hopefully build that network around you.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the more you put yourself out there to find these things, to build that network, the more that network gets built. I think the first step is quite often the most difficult one to take, because just sort of admitting that actually I need someone to help keep me accountable is a difficulty that people need, a sort of habit that people need to develop. Once you're into that habit, once you start using those people, you'll find in all aspects of life, you can find people to keep you accountable. You talk about your issues and talk about the challenges you're facing or the goals you want to achieve, and people along the way will help keep you accountable on those.
And the thing, yeah, we found certainly during the lockdown period, like we changed our networking meetings from being face to face to being online, and we actually find that we're getting larger numbers. I think we're scared to obviously take that time to come face to face to meet people, but people are more likely to come into a meeting in a secure, like when they're in their comfortable location, whether it be home or an office, they're more likely to kind of network, rather than, we all know what it's like. You arrive somewhere you've never been before, and to walk into a room can be quite scary for people when they don't know anyone, when they think other people all know each other. So I think we've found certainly the kind of mix of technology has helped kind of certainly the smaller business network grow, and we're certainly finding more people are more willing to give up their time. I think, I don't know what you guys feel about, you know, how if you maybe had to go to a face-to-face meeting, say somewhere up the East Coast, it would take you maybe half a day or a day out of the business, whereas now you can maybe do that within an hour and then be back at home doing something else. I think that's something that we've learned. I'm not sure if that's something like, I don't know if you traveled for clients in the past, how far you travel, but obviously
we're hopeful that there'll be a balance, I think, is where we're aiming to. And what I could see, for example, is you might go and do the first meeting so you can get a feel for people, and because at the end of the day, we're still people that someone's going to have to buy a service from. So people buy people, don't they?
Yeah.
So going to have that first meeting face to face, and then I think what it hopefully will lead to is that you're able to have more regular communication, but virtually, with slightly less infrequent but more productive face-to-face meetings with clients and customers. I mean, that's definitely how I could see the best of both worlds playing out.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think if you it's like with your team, as I said, if you haven't built the foundations, then moving to virtual is challenging. I think you have to have that initial face-to-face, so you've got that understanding, and you also understand what your client or your contact is comfortable doing. But those catch-ups that otherwise might not happen because they're, half an hour over a coffee because of travel time, etc., are so much easier to do. And certainly catching up with contacts for us, so fellow professionals, has been far more frequent actually, because we've been using virtual means, because it's literally half an hour and you're done. Whereas driving somewhere, it's just time out of your day, isn't it? And it's more of a commitment, which means people tend to push it further down their diary. So I think there's absolutely a balance, but we do not want to lose the personal face-to-face contact as soon as we're able to do that, because that is fundamentally, we're a people business, as Graham said, and without that relationship, we've got nothing. So we really focus on that.
Yeah. So we just had a comment here on the questions about, that someone said when we have team meetings, we don't just use Zoom, we use other project management tools as well to help the meeting move forward. So for example, it's a Trello, ClickUp, and it'd be interesting to know, like in the chat, if other people hold their meetings that way, because I think having a structure in there can help, because I think video meetings can sometimes drag on because people think they've got more time, whereas if it's structured, and I think, as you said, like Becky, putting in your diary, making sure it's a fixed time, but I think obviously having something to help you along with a project management tool or even just an agenda, because I think sometimes, certainly through lockdown, a lot of meetings have been arranged and there might not be as structured an agenda as you would maybe have in an office where you've got a PA there, maybe taking minutes and everything. So I don't know whether you guys use any project management tools or I use anything for your meetings.
I haven't. Have you used anything in corporate?
No, I think the nature of the work we do, they tend to be sort of managed projects in their own way. We do use Teams as a mechanism for managing those projects. We do use agendas to try and keep ourselves on time. But again, I find I have this love-hate relationship with agendas, because I think that on the one hand, they keep you on time and they keep you disciplined. But on the downside, they keep you on time and they keep you disciplined, and they don't allow for that free thought, and they don't allow for the bouncing around of ideas. So finding that balance over the next few months, next 18 months or so, I think Craig quite right, that's going to be a challenge for all of us.
I think one of the biggest challenges of holding, larger meetings on Zoom is making sure that everyone contributes and is engaged. So we've got a partners meeting tomorrow, which will be 24 of us on a Zoom meeting, which, it works. We've proven that it can work. It's not our ideal scenario, but clearly that many people chairing that meeting, keeping everyone engaged, allowing everyone a chance to contribute when we're usually a pretty rowdy bunch anyway, can be challenging. But I think, you have to find ways. You have to try. We've tried various software, for example, various means to work out what works best for us. And I think, try different ways, try different formats. But everyone needs to come with the intention of contributing and engaging, and can't just because they're not in the room sit back and not participate.
Yeah, and I think we've learned that, obviously, because as you're saying, it's fine doing small scale meetings where there's maybe 4 or 5 of you on the screen, but if you've got a large number, it's making sure they know the rules, they know how to. I think we had to do some planning. We had a conference online, which we had 84 participants. You need to make sure you plan so that people know how to ask questions, people know how to speak, so you don't get the usual, someone just turns their microphone on and starts talking, and it gets a bit disjointed. So I think, we've learned, how to plan, how to use the software best to allow proper engagement without, because there's no point if you've got 84 people there, you're not going to have everyone on the screen. So you can't say to someone, just put your hand up if you want to talk, because guaranteed you're not going to be on screen or you're not going to be seen. So it's all about just developing that kind of, like you covered, like the planning on, if you're going to do large scale meetings online, just plan to make sure that everyone that takes part knows how they are run.
Yeah. And I would insist that cameras are used. And I've just seen a comment jump up, and I think that's from Kerry-Ann, who we work with, because if people refuse to have their camera on, then you haven't got their attention, have you? You don't know if they're participating. So
that's dressed that day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's the deal breaker for me.
That is right. It's right. If you're taking part in a business meeting that you would normally be doing face to face, I think a camera should be on, because again, you don't know whether you're getting that person's full attention.
No.
And it sometimes can be off-putting when I've done them myself, when people have got their cameras off, and it is off-putting when your camera's on and they're not. Are you really getting through to them, or are they just doing this because they agreed to do it, and are they really actually interested in what you're telling them?
Yeah, I think we're all learning, aren't we? And we continue to learn. It's like you say, it's understanding how the tech works to best use it. And remember that there is certain courtesies that still apply in meetings as well.
Yeah. So I think we're kind of out of questions there. So we've got 5 minutes left. So I don't know if you've got anything you want to wrap up with, any closing comments, closing bits of knowledge you want to distribute to the attendees.
Yeah, for me, it comes back to that point that if this was easy, everyone would do it. So don't expect it to be easy. Go into it with an expectation that this is going to be a challenge, but it is something that can be done. It just needs some focus. It needs some attention. And I think if you can work on those pillars that Becky and I spoke about, work on building up your strength in each of those areas, I think you'll have a more resilient business as we come out of the downturn.
Yeah, definitely. And I think engagement with the team, if you have one, I completely understand not everyone has, but and building that team around you is really key, because they will hold you accountable as well. What you want is that annoying person who's going to say, hang on, you told us you had a plan 6 months ago and I haven't seen any, development progress. Where are we on it? And that will really keep you focused and on it. But actually don't let it be 6 months, small building blocks to make progress, move forwards, and probably at least 4 weekly catch-ups with those people who are going to hold you to account would be far more productive for you and for your business.
So I think, yep, so Graham, I think got a slide for if anyone obviously wants to find out more, or if the video will be going there as well. I'll put this link in the chat box for you. So obviously that's where you can link up with Graham or Becky going forward. But I think that's been really helpful, Becky and Graham, really interesting. I think it's given people a lot to think about. And as you say, Graham, it's not easy. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it, but it gives people a kind of starting block, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
So, thanks, Craig.
Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks very much.